Charleston Climate Coalition is creating alliances between public, private, and community organizations to tackle the global climate crisis. Today, I talked with co-founder Belvin Olasov for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Belvin Olasov, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Quintin.
Oh, you're very welcome. You know, you are the co-founder of the Charleston Climate Coalition, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that creates alliances between community, private, and public organizations to tackle the global climate crisis by starting at home, particularly here in the Low Country. What's new? What's now with the Charleston Climate Coalition, Belvin?
All sorts of things. We've been very busy lately. I'd say our two main areas are education and activism. In education, we have a magazine called Surge Magazine, tells low country climate stories, and I can announce it here, we have a partnership with Charleston City Paper. So we're going to start being an insert inside Charleston City Paper starting in Earth Week.
Wow.
So climate storytelling is essentially letting people know what the climate crisis looks like to them, how it's coming to the low country, what's already happening,
Yes.
and also the brave stories of folks who are rising up to do something about it. So folks who are revolutionizing our systems like buildings and transportation to be more climate friendly.
What is that major story right now that's driving you to actually doing this?
So the overstory of all of this is that the climate crisis is accelerating. We have more and more greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, and we're reaching tipping points where things are going to get very bad and very scary, and that's just the truth. But we here in Charleston, South Carolina, have a lot of agency in what happens. A lot of the action that's happening is happening on the local level. Local city governments and county governments have a lot of actions they can take. We know what to do, we just aren't doing it. And Charleston can lead the Southeast, in my opinion. Charleston can be sort of a city on the hill, except we're the city at sea level that folks can look to for climate action.
So, Belvin, when you look at Charleston, Berkeley, Dorchester, even Colleton counties, for instance, since we're all in the Low Country, Georgetown included, Williamsburg counties, what exactly are those agencies not doing right now to combat climate change?
So Charleston County is in the very early stages of their climate action plan, and hopefully they will pursue all of these things. But when we talk about climate action, we talk about buildings. So right now, buildings are made with concrete cement, which is 5 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So finding other materials to build buildings with and incentivizing that. And same with building energy efficiency. Having a weatherization program. The county has a weatherization program. I'd like to see it expanded, where they go to folks' homes who are low income, have poor sealant, insulation, they have high energy bills, they're using lots of energy. We go in, we fix up those homes, and now they use less energy, and folks are safer from issues like mold and extreme weather. Transportation, having a really solid bus system, having rapid transit not just in that one spine, but around the Low Country. Having more connectivity and more frequency in our bus systems, and having walk and bike infrastructure. With waste, having composting be pushed. Right now we have some compost drop-off programs at the local level, which is awesome, which is a big step. Can we get to compost pickup like you have in some other states? With energy, right now our energy portfolio through Dominion has a lot of gas and a lot of coal. Can we push Dominion to invest further in solar and wind? So it's things like that. That's how you break down climate action.
Break down this, Belvin. When you talk about those buildings, okay, let's speak, into the future here. What organic materials are needed for these buildings in the future?
Organic is exactly the right word. So things that are organic, like wood. Wood is a good material. You can farm wood instead of cutting down existing forests. You can renewably create wood. Adobe, clay, hempcrete is a really exciting material. You take industrial grade hemp and you make it a building material, and it's actually carbon negative. So in the process of making that, you are bringing down CO2 from the atmosphere. There's a new local nonprofit, the Root Down Building Collective, that's working on pushing forward that issue.
Yes, sir. So where exactly are you seeing this being used right now here in the Low Country?
So right now, that collective I just mentioned is working on a pilot project to prove how hempcrete can work here, because we know hempcrete can work, but the low country has its own quirks. We have our humidity, we have our moisture levels. So there's a pilot project happening right now, and Brightma Farms is developing a hemp refining facility, so local farmers can then send their hemp to this refining facility, and it can just be a little local circular economy creating building material, which is exciting. It's not something that's been possible in the past.
And I want to talk to you all about the transportation and all those other issues, including what you just mentioned in a second. But let me go back to obviously, when you talk about those buildings and being energy efficient, how many of those are there currently in the Low Country?
So we don't have up-to-date data on the need for weatherization, but I believe it was the early 2000s. There was a survey done, and there was over 100,000, I believe, homes that were in need of energy efficiency upgrades. And you look at the state of South Carolina, 1 in 3 South Carolinians are energy insecure, meaning they can't really afford their energy bill. So that's the state of things right now. A lot of folks are dealing with homes that are not energy efficient, and they don't have the money to pay for upgrades. But upgrades would save money. So if we can bridge that gap, if we can create a system that finances that, it's a win-win.
Yes, sir. So let me ask you, how many of those homes right now are not energy efficient?
Well, again, I don't have the numbers. The Sustainability Institute is working right now in 4 historic communities to get a better sense of the need, because they know the need anecdotally, but not quantitatively. So right now, that's being developed. But I can tell you right now that you can just walk around a lot of low-income neighborhoods, and you'll see homes that are in poor shape. And when homes are in poor shape, it means energy is escaping. It means that when you use the AC or heat, things are just leaking through all the cracks. The doors aren't in there right, the windows aren't in there right, the holes in the roof, and that leads to high energy bills. That leads to inefficiency in systems, climate systems. That leads to folks who are dealing with things they shouldn't have to deal with.
So what is the current energy bill here in the Low Country, for instance?
Well, so some folks are paying 300, 400, 500 a month on their energy bill, which is insane when you're low income. For a lot of folks now, their energy bill is their highest bill, and Dominion is actually asking for another rate hike, which would be their 3rd request in this year. And the reason for that is actually because of fossil fuels. It's because prices are up on fracked gas, and they're passing that on to the consumers when they could be investing in clean energy like wind and solar that's more reliable and can be created here in the Low Country and not funneled in from outside.
Where in the Low Country can that be created?
So rooftop solar is a great solution. The town of James Island just recently put rooftop solar on their municipal buildings,
That's right.
which is awesome. I would like every local government to follow suit, because it's not that hard to do, and it sets an example for other folks. And we can expand the number of houses that have rooftop solar here in the Low Country. And there can be solar farms. There can be solar overhangs in parking lots. All these parking lots could have solar overhangs over them,
True.
cooling the cars and generating a lot of energy. There are all sorts of solutions. We just need some investment and some energy.
And I was just talking with a town of James Island Councilman Garrett Milligan just about that just a couple of days ago. He's very excited about that. But how many homes can you expand right now?
So a lot of homes can't handle it. The mitigating factors are whether you have a lot of shade around your home. Some people have a lot of trees.
Right.
Another mitigating factor is weight. Most folks have a roof that can bear the weight. If the roof's in poor condition, it's a bad idea. So that kind of ties right back to the weatherization thing. If you're a low-income household whose roof has not been repaired in a long time, then maybe solar panels aren't right yet. But for most folks, it's a really viable option that will, in 5, 7, 8 years, pay for itself. So if you're a homeowner, I highly recommend looking into rooftop solar, and that's just something you can do. But of course, when I and the Charleston Climate Coalition agitate for change, we tell people what they can do individually, but really the big ticket items are the collective actions. So a city incentivizing rooftop solar with new construction, with green building practices, things of that nature. And that's what we're pushing for.
And what other incentives do you want the cities and towns to give to those residents who opt for that option?
So with new construction, there are lots of incentives you can build in. You can have faster permitting. You can let folks build higher. You can reduce parking requirements. There are all sorts of levers you can pull for green building incentives. And all sorts of things you should be incentivizing. I mentioned rooftop solar. Green roofs, where you have foliage on top of your roof, is a really interesting solution that I think is under discussed here in Charleston because we have a flooding problem, right? That's because there's so much impermeable surface, so many roads, so much hard built material. What if all of these roofs that we have in downtown Charleston, instead of just being a hard surface, have foliage on them, have trees, shrubs, plants? That would mean that up to 80% of the rainwater runoff would be reduced, which is a game changer for flooding in downtown Charleston. And not only that, it reduces energy costs because it absorbs heat. Um, it's a win-win, and it's something that does cost some money but pays for itself eventually with energy savings. So that's another thing that I would like to see investigated is how much of downtown Charleston can we cover in green roofs?
And how much would that cost right now, Belvin?
Well, so like I mentioned, typically a green roof will pay for itself in around 6 to 7 years. Um, so some folks would want some financial bridge program. Um, I'm hoping. So a year ago, the Inflation Reduction Act passed, which is the biggest piece of climate legislation ever passed. A lot of money is going to be coming down the pike on climate. The city is applying for some grants, and I'm hoping that a green bank can come out of that in the state, where there's sort of this funding mechanism for things that will eventually pay for themselves, but not immediately, that are good for the climate. Because a green bank can help bridge the gap, give you a loan to build a green roof, to put on rooftop solar, and you pay it back with your energy savings.
Now, what other things could actually pay for itself in the next 6 years that we're not talking about right now?
Well, my video just went away,
Oh, no worries.
and it's back.
Yes, sir.
So a number of things are externalized costs. So one thing we don't talk about is the cost of air pollution, but it's massive. We not only lose hundreds of thousands of people each year to air pollution, that's a major contributor to their death. But the hospital bills, the loss of productivity, it adds up. So there is a giant, giant cost. I don't have numbers in front of me to air pollution. And air pollution comes from car infrastructure, and it comes from dirty fuels like coal and frack gas. So when we clean up those systems, we are collectively saving money. And same with the climate crisis in general. If we avert the worst of the climate crisis, we are saving downtown Charleston from massive flooding, from massive hurricanes, et cetera, all the climate damages that are coming down the pike. So in a big picture sense, we're saving a massive amount of money by mitigating that, and an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure.
And what are those climate damages to downtown Charleston right now as I sit here?
Flooding, sea level rise is being caused by the climate crisis. A heating atmosphere, a heating world means that ice is melting and sea levels are rising. And so flooding is going to get worse and worse and worse. Rain bombs are also contributing to flooding. Weather patterns are less predictable now, and so instead of just like routine rain, you have rain collecting, and then coming down in massive torrent, which is very dangerous for flooding. You have extreme heat. We're going to have more and more extreme heat days coming down, and those can get genuinely dangerous. Folks can be sick or die from extreme heat days. You have disease pathogens from mosquitoes increasing in frequency, standing water increasing in frequency. You have food systems potentially being disrupted, and you have stronger and less predictable hurricanes. So hurricanes will come faster,
right,
and they'll be stronger on average because of heating waters in the ocean.
So let me ask you, what are the examples of carbon sinks right now here in the Low Country, Belvin?
That's a great question. So our wetlands, our marshes, are wonderful, powerful carbon sinks. It's a magical resource that we have here. And it means that every wetland we have is worth protecting and saving. Because when you get rid of that, you're reducing its ability to bring down CO2 from the atmosphere and store it in the earth. So we are stewards of a really powerful anti-climate crisis resource here with our wetlands. So whatever we can do to protect our wetlands, and sometimes that means giving wetland migration space. That's going to be, I think, a bigger and bigger topic here in Charleston is wetland migration space, because as sea levels rise, the wetlands need places to go to survive. So that means that if there's a building right at the wetlands, that's a problem. You need to give some space for the wetlands to go. So that's an infrastructural thing we'll have to be working on here in the Low Country. And trees, forests. Trees are wonderful carbon sinks. If we can get more of an urban forest going, not only will that help draw down carbon dioxide, be a carbon sink, as you mentioned, but also provide shade for those extreme heat days provide routes for that routine flooding.
And how could they create those spaces right now, Belvin?
So the city is working on it, as I understand it, but currently the east side has a very low rate of tree canopy. The city has mapped it. You can find it online, the tree canopy mapping that they did. And you look at the east side, and it's one of the lowest parts of the peninsula in terms of tree coverage. So it's an environmental justice issue. There's a lot of heat there, heat island effects being trapped. So what we need to do, I think, is work with the community on building some green infrastructure there, and investing more funds and more time and more energy in helping them see what they would like the east side to look like in terms of greenery, in terms of public trees. And you can also have food forests too. That's an option. You can have trees that aren't just doing everything else I mentioned, but also providing food to the community through nuts and berries.
The east side is home for me, born and raised there, still live there, so I know that area very well. But let me ask you, green infrastructure, where else could that be right now in Charleston to make it be energy efficient and protect this particular environment from the climate change issues that are coming soon?
So I mentioned green roofs and I mentioned trees. Another area that we can be doing better on is native plant gardens, sort of an urban rewilding of sorts. And when I say that, I don't mean return Charleston to a jungle, to a maritime forest. But we can be doing better on reducing monoculture lawns in general in the low country. So when you have lawns that are just grass, just shorn cut grass, you're leaving a lot on the table in terms of foliage that's good for birds, bees, local wildlife, the things that eventually will create food systems, but also flooding. You have more foliage, there's more roots, that's more absorption of water that comes in. And there are some beautiful native plants that we could be growing in our lawns. You think about the square footage of the low country that's just monocrop lawn. That could be beautiful native flowers and native shrubs. And it can be arranged in a way that's very visually pleasing. It can be like a garden. And that would be doing a lot to do some carbon drawdown because that's more foliage. It'd be good for local animals, birds, pollinators, etc. It'd be good for us because it would reduce flooding.
Well, let me ask you this, Belvin. Where could marsh grass be laid here in the low country?
So marsh grass is being planted because marshes are dealing with sea level rise, right? Our marshes need tending to. SEDNR, Department of Natural Resources, works with lots of local nonprofits. I've seen Waterkeeper do it. I've seen the Sustainability Institute do it. Coastal Conservation League, probably others I haven't mentioned. Having volunteers go out and plant Spartina grass out in these marsh areas and also oyster beds. So these things that sort of buttress and protect our marshes. That work is being done. The Charleston Climate Coalition, the reason we're called a coalition is because I think we won't be able to do the wide-scale revolutionary change we need without working with other groups. And I'm happy to say that Spartina grass planting is something that other groups have handled very well. We're happy that our partners are pushing and volunteering and getting folks out there to plant Spartina grass. And there are other examples of groups where we can say, yes, that's being worked on. Charleston Moves. Oh, yes. I'm happy to say that we don't have to be looking at every walk-bike infrastructure piece and pushing folks to reach out to their council members and pushing for a bike lane downtown because there's a wonderful group that's already doing that. We just support them and signal boost what they are already doing.
Yeah, and I'll be having Katie Zimmerman back on Quintin in April to talk more about Charleston Moves and what they're doing as far as bike paths, potentially here on King Street right nearby. But let me ask you, how many action items do you have on your list? And do you have the staffing and financial resources to match those items?
Great question. We have a lot of action items on our list. I've mentioned the climate action categories, and we push and lobby for that locally. I helped put together the climate action plan along with so many brilliant people, and our work recently has been funding that plan. So last year we had a push to fund climate action plan with staffing and project funding, and it almost totally worked. We got 2 new staffers, one in the sustainability office at the city of Charleston, and one as a grant writer to hopefully get a lot more funds coming in for the city on climate action. And we got a number of climate action projects funded. But weatherization was not included. So one of our policy pushes this year is to get weatherization in the city of Charleston as a pilot project. We work at other local municipalities, Isle of Palms, trying to get some more climate practices there. Our local sea islands, Folly, Sullivan's. I want to see the islands stepping up because they have so much to lose from the climate crisis, and they have folks there who get it. Um, we have our education wing. So, like I mentioned, the magazine. I'm working on a radio show right now for Own Radio, so folks can just better understand what climate action actually looks like and hear local climate stories. And furthermore, I'd like to be going to more schools and giving presentations on what climate action looks like. And that's a fraction of the stuff we're working on. There's an EJ profile project, environmental justice profile, that my co-director, Dr. Jen Wright, has been working on for a while now, which is taking every single aspect of the environmental justice challenges that community can face. So not just the physical ones like flooding or heat, but also access to legal assistance, access to ADA infrastructure, access to healthy food. So just sort of a comprehensive metric of every single EJ challenge. And then the goal is to work with the community on a pilot for them to create plans on how they would like to address and categorize and research all of these different items. So we're very busy. And we're a small group. We've been around for about 3 years now. And I consider us mostly grassroots. So we have lots of great volunteers. But we could always use more assistance, more volunteers, and more funding. So if you're interested, we have a website, charlestonclimatecoalition.com, and there's a place to sign up to get involved, and there's a place to donate. And either would be very much valued.
And what other fundings are you getting currently?
So right now we're getting a mixture of grants and donations. So with grants, we look at what's out there and we apply for our various projects, and we cross our fingers each time. We've gotten some very helpful grants in the past, but that's been a big part of what has allowed us to be doing this is grant funding. And we have a membership that we're actually working on getting to the next stage. But for right now, our membership is a yearly contribution that gives you a subscription to Sturge Magazine. There will be more coming, more mutual climate benefits and you benefits coming to the membership. We're developing that right now. So hopefully that will make things sustainable. Because this isn't the easy part of this work. There's no easy part. One of the parts of this work that I find hard is the funding bit. Is making sure that we can afford to pay folks to take this issue seriously and do their best to push it forward. But I think it's really valuable. I think the Low Country deserves folks who are being paid to push forward climate action, and that's what we're trying to do.
Why are these municipalities, Belvin, just now taking this serious?
I wish I knew the answer. Let me tell you a story. In 2018, wanted to do something about climate change. My father recently passed, and I found myself wanting to get out into the world and do something positive. And it seemed to me like the climate crisis was one of the biggest issues we're facing as a species, and yet no one was really talking about it. And my generation grew up knowing about it, which creates this dissonance, which creates this bad feeling in your gut of, oh, I know this crisis is happening, but around me everyone's acting like everything's fine. I went looking for a climate activism group to join in Charleston, and there wasn't one to join. In 2018, there was not a climate activism group in Charleston. So I volunteered with local environmental groups with the Coastal Conservation League. That brought me to a climate reality project training in Atlanta, which connected me with some other folks. And then in 2019, when the global climate strikes happened around the world, I wanted to be something in Charleston. So a group of us came together and organized, and we put together a rally and a march. And that's how the Charleston Climate Coalition was born. We had a really successful mass movement, and we said, let's keep the momentum going. And since then, in the past few years, I've seen climate rocket to the top of folks' attention, seen local municipalities finally acknowledge it and start to move on it. But the issue is always the scale of the response, because the climate crisis is a big issue, and it's not all on us to take care of it by ourselves. But the science says that if we don't reduce emissions by 50% by 2030, we're in trouble. And that takes large-scale change. It just does. And local governments are not used to large-scale change. They're used to pivoting very slowly. You know, it's like they're a big ship, and they move like this. And we need to get here. We need to get here by the end of this decade. So part of my work is agitating. Part of my work is facilitating, letting folks know what can be done. I think the most important part of my work is channeling people's energy. Because I think there are lots of folks in the Low Country, lots of folks who are maybe watching this, who care deeply about the climate crisis. They don't like the idea that the world is coming apart at the seams and that there is an impending crisis that people are not doing enough about, but they don't see where they fit in. And what I try to do is help folks find a place to channel that energy, help give them discrete action items that they can do that push forward the ball of climate action, and rally folks for a grassroots movement for change, because that's the only way I think we get out of this.
But how did you fit in, Belvin?
Uh, so I'm a writer by trade. I think of myself as a storyteller, and I think that's sort of the main thing I bring to this is the approach to it as a story. Because I think there's a really potent story to be told, not just in terms of what the climate crisis is, and that's an old story, but also in terms of who you become when you rise to it. Because there's a very unique slice of human history we're living in, where you can actually help save the world, and that's not exaggeration. It's literally true. So it's sort of a call to action, a call to heroism that really appeals to me, and it's something that can just be integrated into your life. You know, you don't have to drop everything to work on the climate crisis. You can just find space and time to contribute, to work with like-minded folks on a really spirited, joyful revolution. Because that's how it has to be. It has to be from a place of joy and love. That's something I believe deeply.
Belvin, what human causes have actually contributed to this current climate crisis in your mind?
Yeah, so we found out, scientists, Eunice Foote found out in the 1860s that when you put CO2 into atmosphere, it traps more heat. So we have known for over 100 years that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere traps heat. And then what we've done over the next 150 years is proceed to dig up carbon that over millions of years was collected underneath the earth. So old megatrees, dinosaurs, all of this life, all this carbon-based life that for millions of years was underneath the earth, we've been digging it up and, like madmen, burning it for energy, which sends a ton of it out into the atmosphere. And so that's a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, trapping a lot of heat. So every year, more and more heat is trapped in our systems, thermal energy. And you can look at any graph of CO2 in the atmosphere and increasing global temperatures, and it's the same line. So there's no doubt in my mind, and there's no doubt in scientists' minds, people are not clear on this point, but over 99% of scientists agree on the basic science of climate change. It's human-caused because we have been burning a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide and other fossil fuels like methane, putting them into the atmosphere, and that is how we have the climate crisis. But it means because it's human-caused, anthropogenic, we can also fix it. You know, we are in control of these imbalanced systems that are fueling the climate crisis. And we have alternatives. We know what they are.
And what are the alternatives that you're looking at right now?
So clean energy is the biggest ticket item. So the reason that bringing down energy reduces climate crisis is because right now our energy comes from pollutants, coal, gas. When you turn on the light, you're using a little bit of coal and gas. You know, you're throwing up a little bit into the atmosphere, and that's happening at a large scale. So bringing down energy helps, but the ultimate goal is for our utilities like Dominion to heavily transition their portfolio away from gas and from coal towards renewable energy, towards solar and wind. So that's a big ticket item. And then everything else about our systems, like I mentioned before, our buildings, our transportation, our waste, our food, our carbon sinks, we know what to do. We know how to make those use less carbon dioxide, use less pollutants for the climate. So it's a matter of doing it. It's a matter of transitioning our systems.
And what other systems needs to be transformed right now in your mind?
So when I talk about system transformation, what excites me is that these are things that are also just good for us as people. Because with transportation, anything that reduces the use of cars is helpful for climate change because cars run on gas. A car is a pollutant. And it's more efficient from a climate perspective to have buses. So right now, the Low Country has pretty bad public transportation. I think anyone who moves here marvels at how bad our public transportation is. It's very hard to get around because buses are not frequent enough, not reliable enough. They don't go enough places. So if we have a better bus system where you can actually reliably get around the low country, then more people would use them, fewer cars would be on the road, and would be addressing climate change through our transportation systems, but also having a robust public transportation system that makes it easy and cheap to get around, like many other cities, especially European cities. Same with walk and bike infrastructure. If our cities are more walkable, if there are bike lanes all around, that's a joyous way to live. I mean, it's really enjoyable to get around the city in a bike instead of in your car. It's good exercise. It gets you out in nature. It's cheaper because you're not paying for gas or maintenance of a car. But right now it's hard in downtown Charleston because we have very few bike lanes in downtown Charleston. So by changing, just zeroing on transportation as a system, by changing these things that are contributing to climate change, we are also creating a better, more livable, cleaner, greener Charleston. And that's something that I think is worth fighting for.
And I know I don't want to step on Katie's toes too much, but what connectivity plan in the Low Country actually meets your action plans to change the climate?
So the major big ticket items that we can point to are the Ashley River pedestrian bridge that Charleston Moves is instrumental in getting funded, which is going to begin its early stages of construction approval soon. So that'll be a pedestrian bridge that goes over the Ashley River from the peninsula to West Ashley. And that'll be huge in terms of creating ultimate connectivity with bike infrastructure and walk infrastructure in the city of Charleston. Because it's about connectivity. If you have a bike lane that's great but just stops, then people aren't functionally going to use it. So it's sort of a wide scale. We need everywhere for there to be bike infrastructure, for everywhere's bike infrastructure to be effective. And with buses, the Low Country Rapid Transit System that's being developed, that'll go up the spine almost to Somerville. That's great. I would prefer for that not to take all the oxygen in the room on bus infrastructure, but that's a wonderful project that once it's completed, will create a lot more folks using bus transportation to get from place A to place B. So my hope is that ultimately there will be more funding. So it's not just that spine, they'll go throughout the Low Country. And that also we have an expanded bus system that goes to the places that aren't reached by those rapid transit corridors. So low-income folks who don't have access to transportation get that access they need.
And how many people do you expect to use the Low Country Rapid Transit once it's completed?
So a bunch of folks who cannot afford to live in downtown Charleston have been moving north of downtown Charleston, closer to Somerville, closer to the Goose Creek area, upper North Charleston. And a lot of those folks work in downtown Charleston. So I think it'll be a game changer for them, for there to be cheap, easy public transportation that goes by their homes or goes by their neighborhoods that they can use, that reliably gets them where they need to go, that won't make them late to work. Because it's a rapid transit system, there will be a dedicated bus lane for the bus to go quickly.
Yes, sir. And I want to talk to you more about that in the next interview, and I'm running out of time. But quickly, let me go back to Dominion really quickly, Belvin. How long will that portfolio come to fruition?
So right now, Dominion's dragging their feet on what needs to happen, which is a really concerted transition effort. They're trying to invest more in gas infrastructure, which leaks a ton of methane, which is a highly potent greenhouse gas, which is accelerating the climate crisis. So what Dominion needs to do is Dominion needs to heavily invest in renewables. And right now, their proposals have not been sufficient. And furthermore, in the past, Dominion has punished rooftop solar, or attempted to. There were 2 years in a row, I remember, where they tried to set the rate that they would pay for the energy from rooftop solar so low that it would destroy the solar industry here in South Carolina, which is deeply unserious if you profess to care about the climate crisis, to try to kill off rooftop solar like that. So Dominion needs to do better, and I think folks need to be reaching out to Dominion, letting them know that they need to do better.
And what should the ideal rate be, Belvin?
So you can look at other states for what's competitive, because ideally folks should be being paid fairly for the energy they are providing to the grid. And that's basically the sum and short of it. And if folks are paid well, that incentivizes more rooftop solar. So what we can do is we can look at states, even North Carolina. North Carolina has been doing a pretty good job of incentivizing rooftop solar. Arizona, I believe, is currently doing well. You can look at other states that have good rates on rooftop solar and see what that does to the rooftop solar industry, which is one of the fastest growing industries in the country, a good source of jobs as well. It's a new opportunity. So it's another of those win-wins.
And it's unfortunate I am running out of time, but quickly I wanted to ask you, because you grew up on the islands, so what are the islands currently losing because of all of this climate crisis?
So barrier islands are called barrier islands because they're the ones that get hit by hurricanes first. So that one is ever present in my mind, that stronger and less predictable hurricanes are going to make it a lot more uncomfortable to live on a barrier island because the fear and anxiety that comes with every hurricane season, if you're being true to yourself, is going to get worse every year as the climate crisis accelerates. So that, frankly, depresses me a little bit. Same when you look at the beach and think about what will happen if sea level rise is not kept in check, because you can just see where the beaches are and see what will get swallowed up. Folly Beach is dealing with a lot of sand loss. That is going to accelerate as the climate crisis accelerates. But beaches are where I feel most myself. I grew up by the beach; it's sort of my sacred space, and that's what we're fighting for. So I've talked a bit about climate consequences, but what I like to focus on is just how much we love what we have right now, and how much of what we have right now can be saved, and to just hold that in our hearts as we work on this. We're doing this for ourselves and our futures, for our children's futures, but also because we love our home, we love the Low Country, and it will be irreparably changed unless we do something about the climate crisis.
So, do you believe the beaches, well, the city and towns of those beaches plans, are those plans sufficient in your mind?
Not yet, but a lot of these local towns and cities are just waking up to the climate crisis. So I think this next decade, I plan on a lot of things happening at the local level in these coastal towns, these coastal communities, because there's so much they can do with their bully pulpit, these sea island governments, to let folks know about the climate crisis and to take a hard stand against it. And I'll be working really hard on making that happen in my home of Isle of Palms, in Sullivan's Island, Folly Beach, working with communities there, because sea islands can be leaders because they have everything to lose. You look at Caribbean islands, and globally, they're sort of at the forefront of saying we have to do something because they can see they'll literally not exist if we don't do something. So it's the intrinsic motivation right there of survival that comes in.
And on my next interview with you, Belvin, I hope to talk to you in depth about transportation, about the Dominion portfolio, and of course, what's going on in the Sea Islands. But for now, Belvin Olasov with the Charleston Climate Coalition. Olasov, thank you so much for your time here on Quintin's Close-Ups, and have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.